What's up, everybody? This is Josh Lyles, founder over at Sales-CRM, host of the Freight Sales Content Pod. Today, I'm joined by Mike Riccio. Mike's with More Than Miles Consulting Group and also Open Road Ventures. Mike, how you doing today?
Doing great, Josh. How about you?
Pretty good. Can't complain. Excited to have you on. So,
Thanks.
I first, I guess, came across you originally at the TIA event in Orlando. So
Right.
this is when I think you were handing off your chairman duties and everything. But first impression was the man's one of the best dressed guys in logistics with ease.
That's why I wore the thanks. It's Christmas. That's why I wore the green. I don't know if the color's coming out.
I love the green blazer. It looks sharp as
Thanks.
always. So, um, but yeah, no, that was kind of the first, that was really a transition period for us at Sales Dash where we were going more logistics specific. So, it was a unique conference and everything, but, it's been good to stay in touch with you, especially on social and everything. So today I'm excited to dive into some deeper stuff. I know you've been doing some consulting and everything, but
Yep.
love to learn. I maybe in just kind of like even starting what you've been in the logistics industry for a while now, but like what made you actually transition into consulting?
Yeah, as weird as it sounds, I'm starting my well, it feels weird to me. Starting my 39th year in the
Wow,
logistics industry,
congrats
right?
on
So
making it that long.
thanks, man. Yeah, I don't know whether it's a disease or an addiction, right? That's what I tell people.
Could be a little
Uh,
bit of both.
nah, nah, it's been a good ride, right? Some people know my backstory, some people don't. I worked at a family-owned business called Leonard's Express.
Hmm.
My in-laws, my wife and I, and my brother-in-laws, and some family friends started that business back in 2001. And my in-laws, my brother-in-laws, excuse me, still operate that business today. Really what got to answer your question, Josh, my time at the TIA, which was kind of like I always tell people, that's also kind of like the lyric out of Hotel California. You can check out, but you can never leave, right?
Yeah.
You know, I was there forever. But the combination of my time at the TA with kind of the combination of working in the family business kind of led me to where I am today, right? I've always been drawn to coaching, consulting, mentoring. It's always appealed to me, teaching. And, when I was at the TIA, I was a lot of the members at the TIA are smaller in revenue, right? Like
Hmm.
75 to 80% of the membership are members who have $15 million in revenue or less, right? And those business owners are just busting their chops, blood, sweat, and tears. A day turns into a week, turns into a month, turns into a year. And it's like, how did I get here? Could be good, could be bad, right?
Hmm.
And but they're all alone, right? It's usually just them or them and a couple, them and a trusted friend or them and a family member, and I could relate to that, right? I worked
Yeah.
within the family business, and we all worked together to get it to where it is today, and while it wasn't always, as I use the term quite a bit, it wasn't always sitting around the bonfire singing "Kumbaya." We loved each other, right? And we ultimately could trust each other, and we could rely on each other.
Hmm.
And I saw that a lot of these people at the TIA that I would run into didn't really have that. And, about 4 years ago, I was, just kind of, quite frankly, evaluating what the next step was. I liked what I was doing, but I felt like I needed something a little bit more to fill my cup. And, I sat down with my brother-in-laws and we talked about, hey, what would it look like if I exited? I want to exit I don't want to burn the bridge. It's not that I don't love you. It's not that it's bad. It's not that it just, I was looking to do something different, and this appealed to me. And I thought, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. And so I
Hmm.
jumped into the deep end of the pool, and I thought, how can I work with, usually smaller brokers or, that are in the, 10 to 100 million range, right? And how could I
Yep.
help them avoid some of the mistakes we made, right? Because, if I could do that, I thought it would be, really gratifying. And so that's kind of how I got started. And I just decided that this is what I was going to do. And I had a little imposter syndrome to begin with, Josh, right? You're like, okay, who am I, right? So I was the chairman of the TIA.
Hmm.
That means I knew a lot of people, right?
Right.
I spent 39 years in predominantly sales, business development, and marketing, but I know what I know. But there's a lot I don't know, right? And there's so much
Yeah.
change going on, as you well know, in the industry today with technology and market forces and just some dynamics I don't think any of us could have foreseen. It's like, but I think if what I've found is if I'm just myself and, if I get involved with something that is over my head, which there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
Can I find somebody that can help them? Or I tell people, look, I'm not the right fit, or I'm not sure. Let me bring someone in to complement if we're doing a project that in an area that is not my expertise or my strength, and just being honest with myself as to when I'm working with people.
Yeah, that's when I first went to TIA, I mean, I think it's kind of it's a good area for like you kind of just have all parties in the logistics industry there. I think what's interesting, I think right now there's a little bit of conference fatigue across for a lot of different
Yeah, it's a
people.
good point.
But one of the things that has always stuck out to me about it, especially the capital ideas one, I think it's just it's really like the main one for me, at least at this point, that's just sort of a non-miss, is because it's not always about like, especially on our side, on the tech side, about just meeting brokerages, but it's about like learning about what's actually going on across the industry. And I think that that's what's interesting for especially the smaller guys that you're talking about, is some of them will just sit there and say, well, there's not shippers there, right? It's not worth going to.
Yeah,
But sometimes, obviously, I think there's so many other things that it offers, because of the thing that I love about it is all the micro topics of things that you can learn about. Obviously, you have just like the market stuff, the economy stuff that, you have a lot of other places, but you get people that talk about shipper sales, that talk about carrier sales, that talk about go to market, that talk about
right.
recruiting and comp plan, like literally everything, right? Um, and so, yeah, I think it's just like a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure it probably like help spark a lot of that bug for you to be
Oh,
like, cool, let's help people out on this front.
look at the first show I went to was in 2004, in pre-Katrina in New Orleans, and I didn't know anybody, and I was just really amazed. I'd never been somewhere where competitors were comparing notes. They weren't there. There
Yeah,
was
I've noticed
nothing
that
there,
too.
right? There was nothing illegal going on, right? There was no rate exchange or anything about employees, but it was just like, hey, we're all in this together. I'm not going to give you my
Hmm.
secret sauce, but I'm gonna tell you, some, basically a framework or how we do that. And there's a lot of people in my early years that took me under the wing, and as we were starting up our brokerage, we started, Leonard started in 2001 at ground zero with nothing. Um,
Hmm.
and because we were starting out of the ashes of something that didn't really go the way it was supposed to go, and so we were truckers, right? My in-laws owned a trucking company. They sold that trucking company. That sale didn't go well, and in 2001 we started Leonard's, and we were basically an agent operation brokerage with no equipment. And we knew a little bit about that, but it wasn't
Hmm.
our expertise. And the TIA really, over the, from the education sessions to the networking sessions to the informal networking sessions, right, at at the bar or at
Yeah,
breakfast.
of course.
But so many people that I'm still friends with today. I've made lifelong, not to be corny, but I've made lifelong friendships there. That
Yep.
I spoke with someone yesterday that I've known, since the early years. I spoke with someone, I texted someone last week that we're exchanging, grandbaby pictures, right? And he sat down with me in my early years, and we were trying to figure out incentives and compensation, and kind of
Yeah,
walked
there you
us through
go.
some of the framework of what they were doing. So, and I just think if you take the time to go and put yourself out there, you know how these synchronicities work. Like, look, we meet in 2021. I'm now on your podcast. Who knows who's going to see us today that might reach out to me, that had I not gone to the TA, or had you not gone and
Hmm.
made that effort, it wouldn't have proceeded to where it is today, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you have to put the time and the effort in. Um, but I agree with your statement. A lot of people are like, everybody's so focused on growth. Well, there's other areas of your business that you need to attend to, and the organization helps educate and advocate, for the industry to do that.
Yeah. So transition to some of like I guess some of the consulting stuff and everything. You mentioned secret sauce because I mean that's something that comes up I think all the time for people, especially within sales and everything. And I think from like what I've seen from you, I think you and I align on this on like what you think is secret sauce. But I've at least seen, some of your content and you saying that the true edge for most companies and especially brokerages is their people. Um, do you
Yeah,
is that something that you feel is the case? Because I mean, obviously, like we're on the tech side, there's always people that are looking for some kind of tech or the next
yeah,
AI thing to really try to like give them the
right.
edge. And I do think there is a lot of people that underestimate people and how they manage their people. But what would you like? How do you
Well,
sort of advise on that when you have people asking like, hey, what is the secret sauce?
people are think we were talking before about this before we got on the air. It's interesting you say that. So to answer your question, part of it is I'm not biased anymore, right? I'm not, or I'm biased. I'm not objective about it because I'm coaching and I'm consulting, and I'm a believer in leadership development, people development. But Josh, what's interesting to me, similar to what you said, companies will go spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on a piece of technology
Hmm.
and not really and underutilize it. But they won't spend tens of thousands of dollars on learning and development of their people. And
Mm.
if we step back and are honest with ourselves as business owners of brokerages, we basically all do the same thing. Maybe how we do it is a little different. Maybe what we do as far as what types of services we offer that differentiate us a little bit from our competitors is a little different. But let's be honest. Our people make the difference, and usually in a brokerage, it's either your largest or second largest expense, right? It's
Hmm.
usually your largest expense, or your TMS is typically your largest expense if you're a non-asset based only. And so why wouldn't you want to spend time in developing those people in from a leadership perspective, from a sales perspective, from an operations, from a career development perspective? I mean, I don't know what your experience has been, Josh, but how many times do you take a higher achiever or high performer, and promote them up to a manager and then say, here you go with no
Good luck.
training and
Yeah.
good luck. And next thing,
Yeah.
and it doesn't go well for a lot of different reasons. And so, but people, look, you've probably heard me say this before, and I'm sure some people are sick of me saying it when I'm on a podcast, but I just firmly believe it. You got to control what you can control.
Mm.
And you got to stay educated about the technology that's around you. You got to stay educated about the industry. You got to stay educated about your competitors. But you got to control what you can control and not just follow them because that's what, to keep up with the Joneses. And, you can control your
Yeah.
sales plan, your sales plan, your culture, your response to the market, your effort and your behavior. I mean, those really, and so many people it's a reactive business to begin with. So why
Hmm.
not try to have a little proactivity and to have a little framework of how you want to operate your business? That doesn't mean you're going to be successful, but it improves your chance for success. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't change that roadmap when different opportunities occur. It just means that it keeps you on this path. You look at that opportunity more judiciously before you go make that decision. And you may want to make that decision and change your roadmap, or you may say because you've looked at it, and slowed down a little bit and looked at it and said, does it really fit here? Can we have it complement this plan? And if the answer is no, then you stay in the path and you're like, okay, I didn't go down a path that distracted me.
I wanted to go back to you talking about like promoting somebody to management, and because this is definitely something I think is very unique, especially to brokerage, just in particular. I've definitely seen it across the board in a lot of different areas, but I feel like it's just extremely common for the teams to promote their top performer, the person with the largest book.
Yep.
And when I got into brokerage, I came from brokerage from Tesla. I knew nothing about logistics. It was definitely a lot different, but I actually came into it to oversee a team of six account executives that were shipper sales focused, and then six account managers just focused on quoting, winning more freight, and expanding wallet share. So for me, it was unique because like I got to fully focus. I mean, I did do cold calls and all those kinds of different things, but I got to fully focus on my reps. And I think for a lot of others, they don't because they have the largest book. They get lifted up to management. And I think the irony of that is that that's the person with the least amount of time. And then, like you mentioned, they don't really have coaching or leadership experience. So then they also would need the time for that. But is that something that you still see pretty common today? And
Yeah.
how are you seeing teams
I,
navigate that?
I'm seeing a little bit of improvement in that, and maybe just because people I work with, I've been preaching that or advocating for that how are you going to develop this individual? Okay, so you promote this individual. What kind of resources are you giving them? Does this person know how to manage people, deal with people?
Hmm.
Are they going to be empathetic to somebody who doesn't perform to the same level as they do, and have the same tolerance? Are they going to understand, quite honestly, emotional intelligence and who needs a kick in the butt and who needs a pat on the back, right? And just we're making an assumption just because they're a high performer that they're going to be a good manager of people. Maybe they don't want
Right.
that, right? Some people take that step up and have to take a reduction in pay because they're not making the same incentives on the bonus plan. And really, you've
Correct.
disincentivized them. Now they're frustrated, and not only have you lost the high, you moved that high performer, you've got and possibly lost some business. You've got a disgruntled employee, and look, we talk culture all the time, and it's cliche, but it's true. I mean, look at that. Look at the sports teams that have a great culture in the locker room. Whether it's female sports or male sports, it's always, there's always an element that of culture that you see in successful teams, and I think that there's a lot more available to people today from there's all sorts of training out there, and you're starting to see more and more logistics and transportation training, right?
Hmm.
The TIA doesn't know I'm going to plug it, but I will quickly plug it, Josh. The TIA is developing a leadership development certification program. I'm sharing the committee, a group of people are putting together some content to do just that, right? Called the Freight Leadership Lab, to get companies to how are you going to career path people in your business. And
Hmm.
sometimes I'll be talking to somebody, Josh, and they're like, hey, look, we're a small company and we don't have a lot of layers, and
Right.
look, I can't career path them, and I see that and respect that. And in my past life, we ran fairly lean. It wasn't like we had all sorts of bureaucracy, but you can do
Hmm.
career enrichment, right? You can, conferences, certifications, different things along those lines where you can, provide them the opportunity to do some different things from a career enrichment perspective versus a career advancement if you don't have those layers to it to that aren't those layers aren't in your company. And but it it's really critical to an imperative to take that high performer and don't assume they know how to manage people. Usually, a lot of times, high performers don't like to manage
Don't.
people, or
Exactly.
are not good at managing people. Um,
Yeah. They're great at
so
telling,
I
so maybe just let them do that.
yeah, to go back to your original question, I do see an improvement in that, but it's still pretty common. And it's still pretty common that, hey, Josh, and I was guilty of this. Hey, Josh, I just hired you or just promoted you. Go sit over Susie's shoulder because she's getting a promotion, and because you're not going to do what she's doing, and sit there and see what she's and learn the job. Well,
Yeah.
maybe you're learning not only what she does well, but maybe some of her mistakes and what she doesn't do well. So,
True.
and that's not fair to Susie, and that's not fair to you. So, um,
Hmm.
and so
Yeah, yeah, you make I mean, the point too, and I think that this is, I've had this conversation with a number of different reps, but I think everybody just naturally thinks that management's always the next progression. And I think a lot of people very underestimate, just especially like dealing with the day to day of your own stress. And then, if you're working with a team, the minimum is normally like four people, right? So if you take a team, I don't know, 4 to 8 people, well, now their stress becomes your top priority and you got to manage 4 to 8 different people's. That's a whole other top conversation. And then the big kicker is what you had mentioned of you get paid a little bit less probably than in comparison if you had the largest book in the office, you
yeah,
know?
Yeah, and kind of to kind of complement that or kind of parallel to that, I was talking to someone yesterday, and this individual's looking to hire an operations manager for
Hmm.
or a director of operations or VP of operations, and he's got this person who works for him, and he's going to promote this person. I said, does the person want that job? Have you asked that person? Have you sat down and what's that person's, do you know what that person's aspirations are? Do you know what that person, wants to achieve? And do you spend time understanding what are your goals? What do you want to achieve here? And sometimes we talk in metrics and KPIs and which is good. We need to, right? You need to
Hmm.
be measuring, but there's that soft side of that's just as important as we all know the adage of getting the right people on the bus and then getting them in the right seats. Well,
Hmm.
in order to do that, you got to understand what are their goals, and a lot of times they've never been asked that, right? And then you got to tell them
Yeah.
it's okay to say, hey, look, if you want my job, it's okay. Let's figure out a way. Let's figure out a way to do that. And I'll go back to a quick story. So when my in-laws at Leonard's were looking to retire, they had four children, right? My three brother-in-laws and my wife,
Hmm.
and they were struggling as to who they were going to choose to be a CEO.
It's got to be a
Because
tough
it
conversation,
was a tough conversation, right? Each
especially family
child
business.
was in a different area of the business and a different area of expertise, and so they brought in an outside, quite honestly, consultant that had our accounting firm had suggested, um, because the accounting firm was a family business that had done the same thing. Anyways, I wasn't part of that discussion as far as that role, but he was evaluating all management roles, and he sat down at my desk and he looked at me and he said, "Mike, who are you getting to replace yourself?" Now, Josh, at that time I'm 45. I'm working for my in-laws. Look, I'm working hard, but
Mhm.
let's be honest. I had to do something immoral or illegal to get fired, right? Or basically be insubordinate, right? And
Right.
I was like, what are you talking about? And he goes, you've had a couple high performers leave lately, haven't you? Which we had. And he
Okay.
goes, uh, I think they feel that there's no path for them here, right? And the
Mm.
people who are left are you're creating learned helplessness with them. And he goes, not maybe consciously, but subconsciously, right? I said, well, tell me a little bit more. He said, well, they come into your office and they say, hey, Mike, how should we do this? And you say, boom, 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 and you do it, you answer it for them. And the reason you do is because you've done this for a long
Just
time.
done it. Yeah.
You've done it. You want to get it done your way, and you want to get it done quickly. And so what happens is people subconsciously, when they don't try to come up with a creative idea when they come to you because they know
Yep.
you're going to answer the question. So we worked on different tactics, and I won't bore you and get into it all here on how to deal with that, but we worked on different tactics, but I'd never thought of on how to change that dynamic and improve my leadership style, improve my, as far as developing our people. Um, but I never said, I sat down with my team and would you like to be in this job someday? And people are scared to say that. I'm like, look, no,
Yeah.
if this is where you want to be, my role as your manager is to figure out how to make that happen. And either I'm doing something different, or when I retire or leave, you know. And so you got to be having those conversations with your employees that work for you that you manage as to what do they want to do? Don't make an assumption that that high performer wants to move up because that high performer may
Yeah.
not want to move up. Some people are like, hey, look, I'm good. I don't people problems. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to manage people. I
Yeah.
want to
That's
manage freight.
interesting.
I don't want to manage freight, and they may not want to.
Yeah. I've had some of that too, where like when I was at Tesla, there was an employee. He was, like when I had gotten the download on him, it was, oh, he wants to transition over to the ops side for us over there was, called delivery. And when I came in there, it was one of those things where he actually ended up staying on sales. He was just kind of like frustrated with the sales management. And it was really just because of like the opportunities of like how he wanted to sell. Right. And it was kind of giving him more freedom and flexibility. But you were sort of saying it earlier too, where I think some people, you kind of get into this whole routine and it's like, oh, well, if you can't go to conferences and maybe you can't get out of your your bubble and maybe go like visit customers and stuff. Yeah, that may just be like what you're looking for. Maybe you're not looking for a new position. You just want
Right.
to be able to find unique things that you can actually do to spread your wings within your own current role, and do those kinds of different things. So I've definitely, been around some people where it was actually simpler than transitioning to a different role or a different
Right.
department. And sometimes it is that, right? Or sometimes, yeah, they want to get into your seat, and
Yeah. And
you got to roadmap that out, but you got to ask the question first, like you
you got to
mentioned.
ask the question, and then you got to let them know it's okay if they don't, because sometimes people feel like they want to tell you what you think that you want to hear, right?
Yeah,
And so you've got to let them know that, hey, look, if you want to continue to do what you're doing and they're doing a good job, that's good. I don't look at it.
yeah,
I want you to do what you want to do. It's okay. I don't want you to think that I want to hear you say, I want to get a promotion or I want to get to this position. And if it's they say, hey, well, look, the only way to get more money is to do that. Okay, well, let's if you want to stay where you're at, then let's talk about let's you and I create some ideas and some ways for you to earn more money if this is where you want to be. You got
hmm
to make it okay for them to be open and honest with you, and it's hard, right? People don't like being vulnerable, right?
oh yeah,
Whether it's whether in any type of relationship that's a never-ending journey that we all work on, and but you got to let them know it isn't doesn't have to be about an advancement. And if you don't want to do some of that other stuff, and you just want to put your head down and work, and you like what you're doing, you're good with that. I'm good with that.
great, yeah,
Don't tell me what you think I want to hear.
yeah. Um, I guess like staying on topic, management, leadership, and specific with sales. What are some of the topics that of converse? What are some of the primary topics of conversation that you're having with logistics sales leaders in specific, around challenges, strategies, those things these days?
Yeah. Where we first start is do you have a plan? A lot of people don't have a plan, right? They're just dialing for dollars, right? And
hmm
and and I get it. You need critical mass and you need velocity in the pipeline, but there needs to be some sort of strategy or intentionality to what you want to do, right?
hmm
And so, first of all, so we'll have a discussions. Do you have a plan? Do you have an ideal customer profile, right? Do you really have that mapped out? Does everybody understand what that is, right? As far as size, scope, region, industry verticals. That is, again, you'll hear me say a lot. That doesn't guarantee success, but it improves your chance for success.
hmm
Certainly new business acquisition and is all the talk.
Yeah.
And I try to get people focused on the current business, and I'm starting to see more of that, right? And even I think the market is what the market is right now, right? I don't think everybody says when the market turns, when the market turns, when the market turns. Well, this is the market, right? So let's control what we can control,
Yep.
and 700,000 loads still move every day. So how are we going to, right? Or 6 to 700,000. How are we going to find that? How are we going to find that business? But where I work with people is 80% of your growth typically is going to come from your current or existing customers in any
hmm
market, even in this market. So how do you circle the wagons to protect that business from your competitors, quite honestly? And so, what differentiates you? What's your value proposition? Um, and how what strategy are we going to put in place, because you can put a strategy in place to grow your current accounts,
Yeah.
and there's ways to do that, again, more intentionally. And so we talk a lot about, really, let's focus on the new business, but when we're talking to people, it's not about, hey, can I try that load, will you give me an opportunity? We have to start thinking about, how do we reduce these shippers landed cost? Because
hmm
let's be honest, shippers are trying to, a lot of people that we're dealing with are just beating us up because they're beating us up because they can. Let's just be frank
Yeah.
about that. But other people are not, and they're getting beat up from their CFO, who went to some conference with some other CFO who said, my price per pound, or my price per case is X, and
Yep.
And and the CFO comes back and says, he said his case per pound for transportation is 3 cents a pound, and we're at 5 cents a pound. How are we going to get it to 3 cents a pound, right?
Hmm.
So we've got to figure out a way to make our customers look like a hero to their boss and to their customers. And you're not going to be able to do that with everybody, right? Everybody has different
Correct.
buying styles, so you got to understand how they buy. Not everybody buys on price. I know
Hmm.
price is an important factor, and there's more people buying on price today than ever. I get it,
Probably. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
There is. For me to say there isn't is disingenuous, right? And I recognize that I'm no longer pounding the phones, and so I have to be conscious of that, right? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, because I've heard people like, Riccio, you haven't sat at a desk in how many years, and moved a load of freight. And that's fair, right? I'm like, okay, so I
Yep.
recognize, but there are other things that again, your people, does is this customer really, um, are they really service conscious, right?
Hmm.
Are they, and can your service set you apart? Do they really buy on, security and safety? Certainly, that's a huge topic today, right? Can you
Hmm.
have some sort of unique program that makes the customer feel comfortable that you've got a more secure way to move that freight from it getting stolen or illegally double brokered than your competition? And the problem is we all want the easy way out, right?
Yeah.
We want to move that freight. Well, you got to really stop and think about what solution can we create to set us apart, and then try to message that and sell that. Do they buy on difficult deliveries, right? Like, hey, and or one stop shopping. Like, look, I don't have time. I just want to call Josh and get the freight moves. So you've got,
Right.
in addition to price, let's put it that way, you've got to know what else drives them,
Hmm.
and really think through that. But where I first go is let's get a plan in place. Or if you have a plan in place, are you implementing it and measuring it, right? And what does that look like? What are you measuring, and what behaviors are you trying to, incentivize? And I'm trying to get people out of measuring by activity and really measuring by engagement,
Okay.
right? There's a lot of, because activity, and I'll go back again, not to bore people. I'll go back to a story of my father-in-law. I was 22 years old, and I was on the road, and those years he expected you on the road every other week. So the
Hmm.
first year of working for him, I was out on the road for a week, in a week, on the road a week, in a week. And at the end of the year, I didn't really have any accounts. And he sat down in front of me and he says, Michael, he says, I want to tell you two things. He was very black and white. There was no gray with my father-in-law.
Hmm.
He says, I want to tell you two things. He says, number one, I don't want you to confuse activity with productivity. And number two, if you don't land an account pretty soon, you're going to make me do something I don't want to do. And he got up and he walked away. Um, and he claimed, before he passed away, he claimed he didn't tell me that, but I told him he told me that. So
Yeah.
that's a long story for another day. But I'm trying to get people that activity is important, but it
Hmm.
can mask the productivity.
Right. And what are
Right,
you
right,
actually getting out of the activity? Right. Why
right.
are you
So
dialing?
right, so you need to
Yeah.
be measuring engagements and the quality of those engagements. And
Hmm.
I'm seeing an improvement in people using marketing to bring inbound sales leads and to really get better quality leads for better engagement, right? Where can we use marketing to take away the non-sales activity away from the salespeople? So the salespeople are spending more time developing relationships with either potentially new customers or engagements and improving relationships with current customers. And so um, but the, everybody's looking at their business. Everybody's trying to, keep up with the volume. The volumes are down,
Yeah.
and competition is tough. And so that's why I think it's more important than ever to take a few minutes to think through what's our value prop, how are we messaging that, are we training the people to be messaging it in that way, both in their verbal, in their written communications via email or text or verbally, right? How are is that going on? Because a lot of times that doesn't go on,
Hmm.
right? You have all this. great information that you spent all this time working on, and people are still, on the floor doing this and in their
Yep.
own way, in their own shape, in their own manner, and not being consistent with, your value or the culture that you're trying to promote about your company.
How are you? I feel like from like I guess just a lot of the sales teams that we work with and whatnot, accountability seems like one of those things that slips, right? Where let's just use account management and the follow ups that you have with your current customer base, right, and all the shippers that you've actually onboarded, um, or even just like new shipper prospecting. I feel like it's either way. If you're talking about, hey, what's actually in the pipeline, I feel like when we dive with teams to really try to figure out how do they go to approach that, you do get a lot of just they don't really have a very consistent cadence.
Yeah,
Like it's a culture that I come from where it was like very very consistent, right? Like you're talking about this on a weekly basis at a rep, manager to rep level as a team, is pretty consistent to do. And I feel like that's been one of the shocking things that I've been coming across is some of these teams have salespeople, and then it comes back to, okay, well, what's happened over the past 3 months, 6 months, and nobody really knows what's going on, right? There's no
right,
strategy discussions, or there's nobody in the seat that's saying it makes sense to start with your customers because you don't have to worry about the time it takes to onboard them and do all those things. Like you're already onboarded, you can
right.
move
You
that
already
freight
got the
today. And
sunken cost.
yeah, they have different locations, they have different commodities, they have different modes that they move, and we haven't asked about those, or we haven't, driven into those. Are you doing anything from like a framework standpoint to drive those conversations more consistently, or is it like a weekly basis, bi-weekly, monthly? Because
Well,
I feel like from experience, you get some people that say, okay, great, account management's got to be our focus to be reaching out to our shippers, but it's like, yeah, I called them, I emailed them, they don't have any freight moving this week, and then like that's it. you know, so trying to get that sharpened up, I feel like is
yeah, that
something
really
that a
comes
lot.
down to sales management, for or whoever the sales leader or manager is, and we're having those conversations. I would not, I think, because I think that I don't have a standard framework. I think we have the discussion and I want the customer to create that standard framework, because what might make sense for you might make sense from a cadence perspective, might make sense
Yes.
from
Okay.
something different. But I do think it needs
Yep.
to be there, and I think that tools like your CRM is a perfect tool to do that, right? It's the perfect
Mhm.
tool to let's talk about what the cadence should be, and maybe it's you break your customers into A, B, C, and D type tier customers
Right.
based on some criteria that makes sense for your company, and then they're like, okay, these customers, here's the cadence we expect, here's what we expect,
Hmm.
here's what we expect. But it also comes down to when you're having your weekly one-on-ones with your sales team. Hopefully, you're doing that as a sales manager. That you're walking through, or some sort of regular cadence that makes sense for you, like
Yeah.
bi-weekly, or you're doing a review and making sure that they're asking that next question, making sure that they're asking open-ended questions and probing
Hmm.
questions, and understand a little bit about what's driving the decision making potentially by that client, right? And let's be honest, some customers, it is just strictly price and price alone. Everybody knows that. Okay, then. But I also think there's customers that's not the case. And are you actually asking that next question? Like you said, hey, I called and they didn't have anything today. Well, did you
Yeah.
see if they had anything tomorrow? Did you see what it looks like for the rest of the week? Did you come back with them and say, hey, I saw that you're building a plant in Atlanta, Georgia, and you just landed the Wendy's account, and I'd like to talk to you about how you're gonna cover that additional you're gonna find capacity for that additional volume. Are
Right.
you doing a little bit of investigating background, or hey, I see that your business is up 50%, based on your earnings, or based on a report that I saw, on the news. Are you just having some of those conversations, because you're showing
Yeah.
some that you're just not, that they're not just a number. And I know a lot of times people say, oh, that's corny. Well, that clicks subconsciously with people. Like, look, people like to buy, they don't like to be sold. right? We
Yeah.
all we all like to buy. Like think of our own, your own. I always say when I'm talking to a rep, when you go buy a TV or you go buy a phone or you go buy a pair of sneakers or whatever it is, how do you like to shop? How do you like to buy? You do and some people
That's a
like
good
that
point.
used car salesman type mentality, but most don't.
Right? Most
And
don't.
so are you asking maybe a non-freight question? Okay, so they didn't have any freight today. Did you talk about their business?
Hmm.
Right? And people don't. They just say, okay, thanks, and they move on to the next.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting too because I do remember so like the last brokerage that I was at was very open deck focused. Like hot shots were a really specific uh equipment type that we would move a lot of freight on and like typically ask about. But then you start, maybe start working with them on their hot shots or their flatbed step decks, like whatever it may be. And they, if you're not asking those questions, like they forget that you can move drive-ins or whatever other
Yeah,
equipment type that it
right,
is, right?
right.
And I feel like that is one of the tough things that happens when you're in the seat as the broker is because you're just so focused on your day. They've
Yeah,
got open
yeah,
loads, they're watching the stuff's in transit, they're tracking and everything. So to sometimes zoom out, and I think that's a big factor where managers come into play. Where hey, can they help with that? Like, hey, we're only seeing this kind of stuff. We know that they also do these things. Are we paying attention to that? Are we asking about those things, or just a different lane? So it's challenging. I mean, I think it's just the nature
yeah,
of the beast, right? It's
right.
not the easiest thing to do. It's not. Um,
And right,
I
again,
think
that comes back
everybody
to how you,
struggles with it.
right? It comes back to how you manage them. So I think it's human nature. I think it's normal. I think it's natural based on the position. So as a manager, you need to bring them back and ask them, hey, look, are we asking these questions? Have you thought about this? Are we doing that? Right? And and sometimes just that conversation, like, no, I didn't do that. I'm like, okay, next time we
Yeah,
do, next time you're on the phone with them, did you know that they've got a plant in here that we could service and and so you as a manager have to be making
navigating
sure
that.
that that's navigating that's happening.
How big are you? You kind of mentioned like the market's the market. Um, and I mean on social, like you can't ignore that stuff, right? Because everybody's talking about the market and stuff. Um, how I don't even know like the right way to frame this, but like how much do you take that information to say, cool, the team needs to go action and do these kinds of different things versus, what they're just doing within their own four walls and stuff? Like, do you think that they should be absorbing a lot of that information consistently around like general rates for drive-ins or reefers or flatbeds and like
Hmm.
within a specific territory? And do you think that is like that should influence some of their sales motion? Or like what would you say to
Yeah, that's
that
a
with
good
how long you've been in the business?
that's a really good question, Josh, and I think that can cut both ways. I don't mean to give you that answer. I think it's always good to have data and information available for people that are moving the freight so they know what's going on. The challenge becomes is they can use that as a crutch, both positively and negatively. So
True.
again, you as a manager have to manage that and sift through that for them, right? And filter that maybe for them. So I would answer it that I think it's better to have it, helps them focus, and then you just have to filter out when they're using that for BS excuse or for
Yeah.
a crutch, and versus actionable information that can help them from on a sales perspective. I think the pro of having the information outweighs the con of not having that.
What's one of the top topics that you're having from more of a sales rep level?
At a sales rep level, it's how do I get through to somebody? How do I differentiate myself from the clutter? How do I make contact with, especially on a new business scenario, new business acquisition scenario?
Mhm.
How do I do that? How do I make that happen and get through? And look, there's some tactics, but it's hard work, right?
Right.
There are some different ways you can do it. There's no silver bullet. For me to tell you there would be is disingenuine. Really, what I tell people is I can give you some ideas. I can give you some tips. Maybe some that you haven't heard before. I think one of
Mhm.
the things that I've really come to recognize over the 4 years is I'll walk into somebody's office or I'll talk to somebody. We all move freight from point A to point B, but everybody does it so differently. And
That's good. Yeah.
right. I'll go back to the beginning. People are your differentiator. But what I find is interesting is I might talk to a rep and say, well, hey, I was exposed. I won't give away the secret sauce or who it was, but they tried it this way. Maybe here's a few tips that I've seen other people use that has been
Hmm.
successful. It might be this might be a tactic for you to try to break through the clutter. So you want to call it plagiarism, I call it passing on the the knowledge, right? So but the big issue right now for the sales rep on the floor is just breaking through the barrier of getting someone to respond and that's legitimately will give you an opportunity or listen to what you have to say.
Are people, just in regards to talent acquisition, hiring sales reps or sales leaders and stuff, is that something that kind of falls into the services that you work with teams on? Or is it
Yeah,
more of some of
it's
the
not.
general sales tactics?
It's really more some of the general sales tactic.
Cool.
My role with them is okay. At what point should you add somebody, right? Like what's the trigger, right? Are are you training your people? Is there a plan in place? Is there a strategy in place? And let's look at your growth trajectory and where do you think it makes sense to bring someone in? And then as you're measuring that, how do you be intentional and get the hiring process started before you need somebody, right?
Right.
I think you should always be hiring and looking. And what I mean by that is just always looking because you never know when a rock star will walk through your office.
Hmm.
And hiring, it's like being a general manager of an NFL team, right? It's you know, I've certainly brought people in that I thought were rock stars, and it didn't turn out that way. And so it was like, okay, what did
Yeah.
I miss? How did I miss that, right? Or did I not give them the support and the training? I got to look myself in the mirror. Did I not do what I was supposed to do to help this person succeed? And there was some of that, right? If I look back objectively.
Yeah. Or if you're talking to the rock stars that may be outside, you just never know when the day's going to happen where they say, I got to get out of where I'm currently
Right,
at.
right,
And,
right,
now's
right.
the day and like, you got to
I
act
right.
fast. So
I'm out. I don't like this culture, and there's so many different variables that go along with that.
yeah, yeah, that's always interesting, but also just like whole other challenge of the business. So,
Right.
well, cool. I know we're getting closer towards time, Mike. One of the things that we were talking about before we started recording was also with what you're doing at Open Road Ventures, just on the
Yeah.
M&A side.
Yeah.
What does that look like? I know you're excited about some of the stuff that's going on, and obviously, if you're working to help, brokerages and logistics companies work to grow and everything, mergers and acquisitions are something that are always going to be sometimes the end goal for a lot of people, or the next
Right.
step for a lot of people. What kind of work are you guys doing there with Open Road?
Yeah, like we were talking about, it's pretty exciting, right? There's six of us that are industry individuals, all either in the industry or came from the industry, that are going out and looking to talk to brokers that typically someone that's 20 million to 75 million dollar range, right? We're talking to people a little smaller, and we're talking to people a little bit bigger, but that's kind of the target area. And maybe you worked your whole life to build your business to this point. You don't have a succession plan, but or maybe you're looking to get some fruits for some of your labors, but you're not looking to go play golf every day or sit on the beach every day or walk off into the sunset. Maybe you don't want to go a traditional private equity route. Maybe that's not something that is of interest to you. And so what we're doing, Josh, is we're approaching people, come aboard our platform, right? It's kind of an arbitrage deal, but what it looks like is if you were a broker, we would negotiate back and forth on what we think your company's worth and evaluation, and if we agreed on what that's worth, we'll give you a certain percentage. It's usually 70 to 80% at the day we close. So you take some chips off the table. You still own 20% of your company. Your name stays the same. Your MC stays the same. You're still operating it, right? You now use Open Road Ventures resources, capital resources, to grow. Maybe you were looking at a piece of software that you were a little hesitant to buy because either cash was tight or you didn't have the cash. And what we're going to do is bring a couple people buy a couple companies every year, like-minded people, and we want to have the owners of those companies meet once a month and tell us where should we cross-sell and consolidate. Can we consolidate insurance to reduce transaction costs? Can we consolidate pieces of software and distribute that out to save transaction costs? Maybe there's some other areas that there's lots of areas where we think you could consolidate, but we don't want to
Hmm.
create consolidation for the sake of consolidation. And so, then quite frankly, grow it to about $400 or $500 million, and in 5 years, sell that whole package, and your remaining 20%, you sell at a much higher multiple. And what that does
Right.
is it does a couple things. Number one, you're no longer on an island by yourself, right? We're going to provide resources for you. You don't have to take those resources, but I'm going to be one of those resources, right? I'm an investor in the company to be transparent, but we're going to provide consulting services. There's going to be the opportunity for people from an operations perspective or a technology perspective for you to take advantage of. So where do we collectively and collaboratively, provide? We don't want to come in and run your business. That's not what we want to do. We don't want to come in and strip expenses out to grow the EBITDA just for the sake of growing EBITDA. That's a traditional PE company. That's not what we want to do. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not what we want to do. We're transportation people that have lived what you've lived and understand. And it sounds corny, but how do we help you avoid some of the mistakes we made? How do we help you uh, create a value in your company and be part of something larger? Uh, and then, quite frankly, not to be disingenuous, we're going to when we sell it, that's when we'll also cash out as owners.
Right.
So it's really exciting. It's really been a great learning opportunity for me, and I've talked to a lot of interesting people who are looking to sell their business and not quite sure what it's going to look like. And this is a little bit different, right? It's you're involved. You take some chips off the table. You still got ownership. You still got say. Quite frankly, we want your input as to, and then we want to provide resources to help complement what you're doing to help you grow. Because ultimately, if you grow, the whole business grows,
Of
and we all
course.
we
Yeah.
all we all we all gain when we sell on the second bite of the second time, and you're going to get a much higher number on that remaining 20%. So it's really been a really uh, interesting opportunity at the moment. So always interested in talking to people who are just kicking the can, trying to figure out what their next move is, right? And maybe maybe we're the right fit, right? If you're looking to
Hmm.
sell and walk away, we're not the right fit, right? If you're looking to get the biggest bang for your buck and kind of have like an auction style, nothing wrong with that. You've built your business. You deserve to do what you want to do. That's the right you get for your blood, sweat, and tears. But that we're not the right fit. But if you're looking to, you know, take some money off the table, take some risk off the table, um, and transfer the risk to us, and then we help you grow, and hopefully we all benefit.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a unique proposition. I don't think you're
Yeah,
finding that kind of offer in a number of different areas. And I feel like the resources piece is something that would be compelling for a lot of people. Obviously,
yeah,
just the support.
right. And like I said, the resources will all be industry people who
Right.
that have either been there, done it, or are doing it right now. And we feel the issue is we're not going to force you to do it, right? That's
Hmm.
your up. That's really your call. And look, it becomes about trust. It becomes about a cultural fit.
Yep.
Um, and we're going to have to walk the talk, right? So we're going to, if we do what we say we're going to do, um, then we feel we're going to be successful, and we feel very confident that this is just a little bit different than a traditional sale, a traditional tuck-in, or a traditional financial sale to an investment firm, and we're excited about it.
No, that's exciting stuff. And we'll make sure to, provide some information at the super tail end. I got one last question for you, just before we wrap up. Um, we're recording this December 3rd right now, so we're talking about the end of 2025 and going into 2026. I feel like going into this year, a lot of people were pretty interested just in tech, and especially with AI in specific, of being pretty game changing. Um, I really feel like next year there's going to be sort of like a refocus, especially on around like just fundamentals within the business,
Hmm.
just kind of based on like feedback and I don't know, just when you just listening to a lot of different people that have been out there throughout next year. Is there any certain theme, trend, anything that you're really curious about to be watching going into just throughout 2026?
Yeah, I'm curious as to, really along the technology side, I'm really curious as to where there's going to have to be some consolidation
Yeah,
from some of the tech side. I'm curious as to see, and we've seen some of that right now with some of the,
there's been a good bit this year.
yeah, there has been. I think we're going to continue to see that. So I'm curious to see how that pans out. And I'm really curious to see how some of the voice agents really does that take off or not, right? Some people are
Yeah,
using some of those right now, and where is it complementary to your service, and where can it help? I'm interested to see that, and I always, oops, my camera, sorry about that. I always tell people that let's do a technology, reconciliation. Let's look at all the technology you got in house. Are you using it to its
yep.
fullest extent? Are you not? If not, you know, should you get rid of it? Yes or no? And if you should, when's it renewal? If you shouldn't, what's the plan to use it? It's a little more complicated than that, but from a simplification perspective. But I'm really it's from a technology perspective, what's going to happen consolidation, what is or is not going to happen with some of the voice agents. And then from a non-technology perspective, I think you're going to see more improvement in discussion on sophistication for salespeople around them about marketing and sales, and the connection between marketing and sales, and
He-
some of the, because some of those tools, those technology tools, are on the marketing side that can feed leads to the sales side, and how is that going to work from an integration perspective,
right.
so I'm interested to see where that goes in 26.
It's a good point. I definitely been seeing some stuff form up on that, whether it's around lead gen, intent, like just kind of a number of different things that are more
Right.
industry specific. And yeah, it's fun. It's fun to watch and kind of hear from some of those that are building them how they're growing, just kind of going and growing. So well, no, Mike, it was great stuff, and really appreciate the
Thanks
time for
again,
you to
Josh.
to join the podcast here. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they're interested in
If they're
consulting
interested, you
or
can, you can ping me on LinkedIn or and my profile, or you can email me at mike@morethanmilesconsulting.com. And either one of
simple
those, and
enough?
I appreciate it, man.
Good deal. Mike Riccio. Mike, really appreciate the time today, and hope we can chat again soon. Hope to see you again soon.
Sounds good. Take care, Josh.
Take care.